Welcome to another edition of the Miami Herald's Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm your host, Miami Dolphins columnist Omar Kelly, and joining me right now is the illustrious Barry Jackson, who attended the Chris Grier press conference today. The top executive of the football side of the operations is required to talk, I believe, 3 times a year. Is that accurate, Barry? Is it 3 or 4?
Before the draft, after the draft, and today he does it after the season as well. So we get him typically 4 times a year. And yes, we heard some familiar things today that we're going to get into.
There were a laundry list of roster moves made, Barry. You're probably a little bit more in position to go over them, but I'll cover the ones that I do know. The Dolphins claimed a wide receiver named Grant Dubose from the Green Bay Packers. They obviously liked a lot that he had shown on film. This is a young man who played his college ball at Charlotte,
North Carolina, Charlotte, right? Put up some big numbers in 2 years there. A no-star recruit, no Power 5 offers, no real offers of any kind. He began his career in Division II, did not play a snap for the Packers last year. He was on their practice squad, was elevated for Week 17, but didn't play in the game. So kind of an obscure guy. And it was clear, Omar, from what Chris Grier told us, that the fact McDaniel has relationships with the Green Bay staff, with Matt LaFleur, he called and got good feedback on him. But at the same time, it was surprising to see that be the only claim, a receiver who hasn't played in an NFL game. You already had one who had barely played, and as a comma, why not just keep him? But that's a story for another day, I guess.
Hey, we're just kicking tires here. I have no issues with the acorn scavenging, but I do have an issue with you weakening what I, and probably you, would agree is one of the weakest positions. Jack Driscoll, who obviously my amateur eyes must be misleading me, but I thought he had a pretty solid training camp, preseason. Yes, he was required to play center, which is a position that he's not familiar with, had to do it in 2 games. So you're not exactly getting the best sample size, but his work at right guard was good. And you put him in the game at right tackle, his natural position. He kind of held it down there after Matos gave up a horrendous play that makes you wonder if he even belongs in the NFL. That's another story on itself. But Jack Driscoll got cut today, Barry. Now, this could be a move made to not have to pay his entire guaranteed contract. For all we know, Jack Driscoll can be signed to the practice squad tomorrow. For all we know, he can be signed to the 53-man roster in week 2, which is when you don't have to guarantee their entire contract. This is schematic stuff that they do to skirt the paying players guaranteed contracts. They like to go week to week with older players, which is why the NFLPA needs to step in and do something about that. But Jack Driscoll is now exposed to the rest of the league, and if somebody's in need of a veteran offensive guard who could also play tackle, who also has snapping experience, if I were them, I might consider snagging him up.
Yeah, I think this was a mistake. Now, look, if Grant Dubose becomes a great NFL player, then more credit to Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel for unearthing Grant Dubose. But if he's not anything more than a journeyman guy or a fringe roster guy, then why would you weaken yourself at your weakest position? I don't understand it. Not that Jack Driscoll was, going to be a Pro Bowler this year, but at least he gives you competent depth. Now, there's not going to be any Lester Cotton hating on this show today for a couple of reasons.
Are you saying there has been Lester Cotton hating?
Well, marginal Lester Cotton, but I'm going to say this. He was the highest-rated Dolphins offensive lineman according to Pro Football Focus. I know you don't put much stock in their numbers. And I had a good moment today with Lester Cotton. First day locker rooms open, went over to him, asked him about winning a job, how meaningful it is to him. He was really emotional, and it was a moment where he talked about how meaningful this is for him to finally be an NFL starter. He said he knows deep down he's an NFL starter. He's proud of himself. He's going to prove it. And we'll give the guy a chance. His preseason was fine. Perhaps he'll hold down the job if Liam's at center. We don't know how long that's going to be. And perhaps he'll perform confidently. So that's where they stand at right guard. But yes, dangerously thin. They opted not to re-sign Matthew Jones, the Ohio State guard, which I found interesting. He's not among their practice squad members. So they don't have a lot of guard. Jason Hines is on the practice squad. So basically it's going to be Eichenberg or Driscoll. And I don't mean Driscoll, obviously Eichenberg and Lester Cotton are the right guard options, and then Brewer at center once Brewer's back. Is that good enough? Probably not, but we'll see.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking that not Driscoll, damn. Brewer will not be back for the season opener. If he's not healthy for the season opener, probably week 2 against the Buffalo Bills. We saw him start to begin rehabbing earlier this week. And I kind of saw the laceration. I have no idea why you can't play with a glove with that. I don't know. Barry, let me just put it to you bluntly, and I know you understand exactly where I'm coming from. Your season and your quarterback's health is in the hands of Liam Eichenberg.
These things happen. It's all part of NFL life. Liam's doing the best he can, but I got worse news for you because I know that we all root for Liam. You know, we kid him, but I think deep down we all root for him. He's a good guy. Here's what scared me today. Chris Grier asked about Isaiah Wynn. He was asked, "Are you sure that he's going to play for the Miami Dolphins this year?" And he said, "That's the plan, but we'll see."
His reaction was, "I don't know."
Anytime you got a "we'll see," obviously your antennae go up. You're alarmed, and it's just so bizarre that they went down this road without any sense of how serious his injury was. Now, if he had a setback after signing, that's one thing, but we've got no indication that the setback occurred after the time that he signed. If we had that indication, then maybe we'd be more forgiving.
I have been told by a former NFL defensive lineman, Leger Duzable, who I've worked with at the I Am Athlete. He told me that quadriceps injuries for a 300-pound man, quadricep tendon injuries for a 300-pound man is very challenging. It's not like, oh, I'm healed. There could be setbacks at any point. And we all know that Isaiah Wynn has had some fragility issues. So as does most of this roster. So, let's just cross our fingers and hope for the best. That seems to be what Chris Grier is doing. So why should we not do the same? I'm puzzled. I'm alarmed. I'm concerned. But then Chris Grier is like, "You're always puzzled, alarmed, and concerned," and I laugh at that.
Yeah. That was the great moment of the press conference today. So just to set the scene for people who haven't heard the audio, so I began the press conference today by asking Chris Grier, has he tried to, or is he trying to trade for quality starting offensive linemen, interior linemen, or a nose tackle? And I said, if you aren't, what is your reason for not doing so? And he basically said they're happy with what they have at that position. But the funny thing was, his first line was, Mike McDaniel and I were just joking today about the fact that you guys make fun of us for the line that Grier used last year, which is, quote, "You guys worry about the offensive line more than we do." So he was good-naturedly mocking us. And Greer's a nice guy. He's not going to do it in a dismissive, disrespectful way. But he was mocking us for basically mocking him. But the bottom line is he still is going to go down on the sword for this offensive.
It seems like he's going to stand on
the fact why basically they've been proven right and we've been proven wrong. Yes. And he said the reason why they're right and everybody else is wrong based on Tua, isn't that more Tyreek than the offensive line?
You broke up a little bit there, Barry. If Tua's defense of the offensive line is I get the ball out quickly, I don't have much hope for them. Here's the issue. And all this is well and good when you're up and you're trailing and you can run the ball. All this is well and good when you can keep teams off balance because they don't know if you're going to run a pass. But when you get into that 3rd and 8 situation, when you have to protect Tua for more than the 2.8 seconds that he's allowed, that he normally keeps the ball in his hand, and he's got to wait for his receivers to get open or wait for the ball to stick it in the spot, is that protection going to be there? And we all saw last year, late in the season, it was not. I could tell you instances in the Tennessee game, instances in the Buffalo game. The protection was not good. And it wasn't always the interior of the offensive line, but it was something that compromised Tua's ability to look downfield, ability to throw. And even in Tennessee, ended the game with 2 sacks. So, hey, in my mind, you're gonna laugh at this. You're gonna mock it. Okay, no problem. when I'm calling for your head because the quarterback gets hurt because of the offensive line or because your season is flushed down the drain because of the offensive line, make sure you want to laugh and mock at it then.
Right. And also going back, they could have created cap room at the time to sign better quality interior offensive linemen. I know they'll say, well, we committed over $20 million to Brewer if he serves out this contract. But obviously they went cheap at guard. They went with Jack Driscoll, who they didn't even keep. They went with cheap options with Lester Cotton and Liam Eichenberg. So if they had merely extended Tyreek earlier, which you were advocating from the very beginning, if they had done that and created the space back in March, then they would have had enough to add a guard that you can count on. And again, I said there'll be no Lester Cotton hating on the show. But at the same time, they could have addressed this earlier this offseason, signed a quality guard. They ultimately had the money to. They're sitting here on $30 million in cap space with nobody to sign now among all the guards in the world because all the good ones are under contract. So that's what they should have done. I think they mishandled it. But you know what? They'll have the last word, and good for them if this line delivers. The problem, Omar, is that each of these offensive linemen who they have now, interior guys, have a history giving up sacks. Aaron Brewer gave up 6 last year. Connor Williams didn't give up any. Rob Hunt would go a whole season giving up only 1 sack. Lester Cotton in a handful of games gave up 3 last year. You know Eichenberg is going to give up some sacks. Isaiah Wynn last year didn't give up any sacks in the 7 games he played, but now he's out indefinitely. So the history would suggest the guys that they are playing are going to give up sacks, and you just hope that none of those sacks knocks Tua out for an extended period.
Yeah. Hey, let's wish for the best. With a fragile quarterback averaging $47 million, let's just give him adequate protection and wish for the best. Okay. Let's talk about a little bit about some of these practice squad guys, Barry. Eric Uzukama is back. Nick Needham is back. Those were 2 guys that we would both acknowledge would have been some of the final cuts on the 53-man roster. Obviously, I'm sure they're not happy at their reduced salaries or the fact that they've got to earn their playing time, but I think that's fair for both players. Anybody else on the practice squad, Barry, that intrigues you?
Well, I'm glad they kept Isaiah Johnson. I know you thought he was the most intriguing cornerback of the 3 rookies. They kept Storm Duck. They didn't keep Isaiah Johnson, but they re-signed Johnson today to the practice squad. He was in the building. We think there's something to work with there. You know that I like Hayden Rucci. I think he showed a toughness, blocking skills in preseason, caught the ball well in the finale in Tampa. He's back. Anthony McFarland, just another body at running back who essentially replaces Chris Brooks. Chasen Hines, DeQuan Jackson, Jonathan Harris is back. This has value because you need a veteran defensive lineman if you have an injury to one of your defensive tackles or defensive ends. So having Harris will help. And then Jordan Colbert, the Rhode Island safety, is back as well.
You know what's interesting? I thought Mark Perry was playing better than him, was playing more than him, and all of a sudden, no Mark Perry and Jordan Colbert.
Mark Perry. They didn't pursue any of the receivers that they cut, not Braylon Sanders, who's injured. They did not pursue Mike Harley. They did not pursue Kyreek McGowan. I told you I was a little surprised they didn't pursue Matthew Jones, the offensive lineman, and then Perry they didn't go after. They've told Isaiah Mack, maybe we'll bring you back, but they kind of have that in Jonathan Harris. So,
but Isaiah Mack was good, man.
I'm with you.
I don't get that.
For those who've asked about Chris Brooks, he's unhealthy. He can't return anyway at this point because of an injury settlement. So that ship has sailed. Maybe we see Chris Brooks here next year, but that's not anything that's happening.
I thought the injury settlement is the amount of weeks that you would have been sidelined. And then after that, there's like a period where you cannot re-sign with Miami, but then you can eventually.
Yes, he can eventually. But for those asking, why isn't he here in the building today? He's not, because they can't sign him now when he's hurt. So I eyeballed in the locker room today as Uzukama. We're not allowed to talk to him. Nick Needham, saw him today, and Isaiah Johnson. So all of them are back. Now, 3 new members of the practice squad who were not announced today, but Chris Grier told us, which was nice. One of them is a defensive tackle who's played in Arizona and Tennessee named Naquan Jones. So he would be probably your next defensive tackle up if you happen to lose Brandon Peeler.
Yeah, he's a nose.
Jones is hurt, right? And then Dwayne Eskridge, who had 17 catches for 122 yards in 17 career games for Seattle. Good kickoff return guy, averaged 25 yards on 17 career kicks. And I saved, Omar, the best one for last to get your reaction. Tim Boyle is their 3rd quarterback. Now, Tim Boyle arguably is the worst quarterback in the NFL. And I would like to add the words "with all due respect," but doesn't that sound weird to say someone is the worst at something and then say "with all due respect"?
It is. It is.
Career passer rating, 4 TDs, 12 picks. What do you make of this? Was he the best person on earth for the job? Are you kidding me?
Listen, Barry. When I heard that, listening to the press conference, because I've got a sick toddler, so I was not there, to full transparency. But when I heard that, I thought to myself, wait a minute, wasn't Tim Boyle like the worst quarterback that we saw on the Dolphins schedule last year? And I was like, oh man, okay. But what Chris Grier said was that they went over the film. Mike McDaniel and quarterback coach, gosh, why does his name escape me? Darrell Bevel went over the film. They liked what they saw. And also he's familiar with their style of offense, with their terminology, with their languages. So I get it. Let's hope he's a great studier and gives the scout team a very good look, because that's all he's going to be doing. And if God help us, he has to play in a game, we're in trouble.
But remember, one thing also for people to keep in mind, if Tua, God forbid, if Tua goes down and Skylar Thompson goes down in the same game, you can't bring in Tim Boyle unless he was elevated before the game. So basically, you're going to have to know. You're going to have to be Nostradamus and know the games that both Tua and Skylar are going to be injured in the same game at the same time, and predict and have Tim Boyle available for those games. One thing that's funny is Javon Holland was asked today about obviously the long touchdown that he had to close the first half of the Jets game off a Tim Boyle interception. And he was asked, are you going to kid Tim Boyle about this? And Javon Holland said, no, I'm going to just welcome him to the team. I guess he doesn't want to rub salt in the wound. But that play was something, as Al Michaels described it, insanity. Right? Was Al Michaels' call of that Javon Holland play. I think this. Yeah, I'm sorry to break a train of thought. I just want to tell you real quickly before I forget, because we were talking about Javon Holland. He said today he's fine. He's going to play in the opener. So anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. But yeah. Continue.
You mentioned insanity, and I was going to say, man, I think this whole week, these roster decisions, transactions, it's just insanity. I like the roster a lot better during training camp than I do right now, as they're approaching the 53-man roster. And here's the important thing. As of today, the Dolphins, I believe, have 13 days before they play the Buffalo Bills. And this is why this is important, Barry, because right now you've got 13 days to change your audibles, to adjust your hot routes, to kind of change up the Jonnu Smith package. Let's see, what else do you have to change up? And all of this because Mike White, the guy who intimately knows your offense, the guy who intimately knows your quarterback, is now a member of probably the worst team that he could have ended up signing with, which is probably the reason why he signed with the Buffalo Bills, to be a member of their practice squad. I'm dying to know what that contract was, because I'm pretty sure the Miami Dolphins offered him a contract to return in Miami, but Buffalo probably trumped it, because I have a hard time believing Tim Boyle was the answer, or the right answer. Man, oh man, Barry, I am so uncomfortable about the team that's going for their 5th AFC East championship, having this intimate knowledge about your team that, pretend as much as you want, you're going to have to change a lot of things.
Grier downplayed it today. Grier downplayed it. He said, we have Jordan Poyer. But you made a great point on Twitter. Tell everyone the point you made on Twitter about why it's apples to oranges.
There is nobody who, literally, Mike White can recite the plays. He can tell you the entire Jonnu Smith package that you got a little sampling of in the preseason, which Miami's not going to show anybody until they probably get to the game situation, and probably not even Jacksonville, probably saving it for Buffalo. Well, Mike White can outline the entire Jonnu Smith. He can draw up every single play for it. Like, this is so insane to me, but this is part of the NFL. And for people who want to downplay it, as I wrote in my column, there's a reason you see every NFL coach like this, talking like this. Like, this is how they call in plays. Because they know they all cheat, Barry. They know they all cheat.
Right. And what's funny is NFL teams are so concerned about us knowing the body part of a player that's injured, or if a guy is practicing or not. But this basically the whole playbook can be handed to Sean McDermott, and the Dolphins just shrug it off and say it's part of the business. Now, the question for you is this. Should this have affected what they did with Mike White? Should they have kept Mike White over Andrew Meyer because of some concern that an early season opponent might claim Mike White?
Absolutely,
that's a difficult
Barry.
way of doing business.
Absolutely, Barry. This is
really okay.
No question about. I'm sorry. Who's picking up Andrew Meyer on practice? Nobody claimed anybody that Dolphins cut. Nobody claimed them. Everybody. We always have this romanticized thought that everybody's going to want our players. Everybody's going to want it. Nobody wants these players. Like, come on.
Yeah, nobody took anybody except Mike White and Neville Gallimore. With Gallimore signing with the Rams, and that's it. So all of our concern about Isaiah Johnson being claimed and all these guys being claimed, it was all fruitless worry because nothing came of it. But with White, Omar, I can't keep Mike White for fear. I wouldn't keep Mike White for fear that Jacksonville or Buffalo or Seattle.
All your audibles have to change now. All your audibles have to change now, Barry.
Well,
every single one of them.
It's part of the. It's unfortunate, but it's part of the game. I blame the Dolphins for a lot of things this week, but how can I blame them for not knowing that Mike White would sign with Buffalo, right? I mean, that just seems so random. I don't know that there was a way to anticipate that. So it comes down to this. You would have kept him just to prevent him from going to a September opponent?
It is what happened. My point is, what happened was your worst fear. And here it is, your worst fear. And now it's going to require a whole lot of extra work that you're not really prepared for because, hell, you need to get ready for Jacksonville. And then, yes, that game is just as important, if not more. Remember, you're also on a short week, Barry. It's going to create challenges for the court. Like even the cheat motions. Think about that, Barry. Who has intimate knowledge about the cheat motions that Miami used and how Tua calls them, and when Tyreek is going to go, yes, you can make subtle changes and throw them off, and it might draw a penalty or whatnot. But they know now, Barry. They know. Yeah. They have all your secrets now, Barry.
It's worrisome. I'd like to see, Bill Belichick has taken some media jobs. And the thing that I want to see him asked by Peyton Manning or whoever's on the show with him is exactly what does he do with this long list of Dolphins that he's signed from Malcolm Perry to Calvin Munson to God knows who else. What does he do with them? Does he take them in a dark room? Are the window shades down? Does he give them water? Does he give them a small snack? Does he keep them there like a prisoner and interrogate them for 5 hours saying, you tell me everything that Brian Flores was doing a few years ago or that Mike McDaniel's doing now? I wonder what it's like and what Sean McDermott is going to actually do with Mike White to get all of this information, because we both think it happens, but I'd like to hear more about that process.
It absolutely happens. And I remember talking to two players who were part of the experience. One did it for the Dolphins and one did it for another team, AJ Francis, when he got signed to Miami. It's like, it's download time. What do you know when he got signed to New England? What do you know? So it's a challenge. I know. Here's the thing: if it was a player at another position who didn't have intimate knowledge about my quarterback, literally, he knows what Tua likes, what Tua doesn't like, what Tua doesn't like to see. He knows what Tua is looking for on third down. What does Mike White not know? Tell me what he does not know. It's really interesting. Now we want to bring in Isaiah Smalls, who is doing a piece on not rookies, but fringe players. And those guys, what's that waiting process like when you're right there on player number 47 to 53? The Aaron Myers, who hopefully is renting and not leasing.
Or
and
Andrew.
not
Right.
Andrew.
I don't even know his name, which is
and he's not bad.
Sure. Well, I think there's one word that really captures how all these guys were feeling, and it's anxiety. Like I talked to Meyer, Channing Tindall today, Quentin Bell, who has been through this process multiple times, and that's the one thing that they universally said. There's a lot of anxiety heading into yesterday. You have to find a way, especially now that it has changed, right? I know in the past you used to also practice on the cut day, which to me sounds absolutely insane, right? Because imagine getting done practice and it's like, well, yeah, you're out of here. It's just, I can't even fathom that. But the drawback with them not having practice, though, is that you have to find a way to keep your mind occupied, right? You know, if you're just sitting there all day, you're going to drive yourself stir crazy, right? So I know Meyer said he went to go see the new Deadpool movie yesterday. Tyndall said he was playing video games. Tanner Connor said he was just, you know, happy to have a good wife at home, and, you know, they were just chilling. So for me, the word that I took away from the word that I took away from this situation is anxiety, because like, I can't imagine, as I got a funny quote from Tanner that said, like, there's not a job in the world where you can get fired and never have to and can never work again. Like, think about that, right? Like, if you're released and you're one of those people that like nobody wants, it's done. Like, your whole NFL career is over, right? And so just being able to cope with that anxiety, like I give them guys a lot of credit, because, you know, they, you know, simply said they were going stir crazy. So just to, now that they're here, you know, it's a sense of relief for sure. So
good stuff. And one thing I find interesting about the process, guys, is the players who make it as bubble guys are not necessarily informed that they've made it. Storm Duck said he had no idea he had made it until he started scrolling through Twitter and saw all the Dolphins cuts and realized he wasn't on them. Now, add this from obviously reporting a lot yesterday about guys who are going to be cut. I know that in some cases agents seek clarity from the team, and sometimes they're told your guy is safe, you have nothing to worry about. I know there were at least a couple Dolphins did that yesterday, but I can also tell you this: there were a couple of bubble Dolphins yesterday whose agents were not told whether their guy was going to make the team, and they were waiting literally till 4 o'clock or shortly after to get clarity. So yeah, it's one of the most stressful processes you could ever imagine for anyone to have to go through. Storm Duck called it surreal today, but it's always nice, and Isaiah and I experienced this today, Omar. It's always nice to see the joy in these young men's faces after they make an NFL team, because whether they're here for 10 days or 10 years, it's an accomplishment. It's impressive.
Yeah, what's interesting, I always find that these guys, they always work harder. They respect it more. They're not entitled. Look at Julian Hill. Look at Chris Brooks. Those guys, they are going to run through a wall for you, which is why I think the Dolphins, I didn't know if this was going to be the year where the streak ended, where they didn't have an undrafted guy, but it seemed like there was a priority to keep undrafted players. Now, my hope is that Andrew Myers won't be like the center that they signed to their practice squad last year, which when they had center issues, they didn't have comfort level in calling him up, so they just waived him. Like, my hope is that the talent that you have here, if they're on your 53-man roster or they're on your practice squad, it's not just because you want to be nice or you like the kid. It's hopefully that they can play. Now, we know Storm Duck has had some bright moments, and he's been a good player, but he's got to go out there and he's got to earn his keep on special teams right now. This isn't no I made it situation. I remember the years of Bill Parcells. Do you remember these years, Barry? The early years of Bill Parcells, every week, if you made a mistake every week, somebody who made a mistake in that game was getting waived. Yes. And to the point where Eric Walden, who was a very valuable special teams player, he made a mistake on special teams. He got waived the next day, had a wonderful career in the rest of his NFL career. He had like an 8-year career, but that was the mentality that they had. Like, you go make a mistake, it's donezo for you. So, my hope is that the Storm Ducks and the Andrew Myers of the world, congratulations that you made it. The Tanner Connor, who I think he's not going to be here for long. I think he's eventually going to be demoted to, and that's my thing. I'm sorry. You could have demoted Tanner Connor and put Jack Driscoll, kept Jack Driscoll.
You're viewing Connor as a guy who can take essentially some of the third receiver snaps. By the way, a couple things I want to touch on this topic, because you mentioned Tanner Connor. It doesn't have to be a third receiver taking these snaps. I talked to Ashan today. He's going to get a lot of work at receiver, he thinks, early in the season. He says he loves that. He's prepared for it. So that's one thing to look for.
He's got to learn to catch, Barry. He's got to learn to catch.
True.
Those hands are not great. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, what he catches is obviously, he's explosive as anyone on the team short of Tyreek. Want to touch on a couple other things before we go today. One is, I thought the Odell Beckham comments from Grier were interesting, where Grier said Odell wanted to be active for the first 4 games. He said, we put him down. He said, quote, we put him down, like he's talking about a horse being given a tranquilizer. But he said this was a Dolphins decision. They're looking for the long term. So I thought that was interesting. And he did say they were aware when they signed him that there was a procedure done. He refused to say the body part. We think knee, but we don't know that with certainty. And he said that is a reason why they're not upset, because they knew that this could happen. How did the Grier comment strike you about that, Isaiah?
To me, it was very revealing, right? I think, when it comes to a guy like Odell who has, struggled to kind of finish this season, I think it's smart to just, be cautious, right? Because that is somebody that you want to have come January, when it really matters, when it truly, truly matters. You don't want to be, throwing out, some random guy just because now OBJ, your splash signing, for that receiver core is no longer able to go. So to me, I think the cautious optimism is a great approach, honestly.
Yeah. Also, I want to mention this to you, Omar. Thought this was interesting today. Chris Grier threw out to us that several teams called about trading for Ethan Bonner, which was awfully random. Nice little tidbit he gave us, but he said they really like him. Ethan spoke today about, he'd love to obviously be able to play. Now, at this point, with Cam Smith injured, he's probably your fourth corner, right, behind Kohu. And can he handle it? He said he's ready to defend NFL receivers in real games. Wow. So we'll see.
I think I didn't see him behind Cam Smith to begin with. I never thought he was behind Cam Smith, and neither did Vic Fangio. So it'll be interesting. But come on, trade offers. What are you going to offer?
Yeah, I found that.
I was surprised when he said that too. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
That's the name you're going to volunteer and throw out there, Ethan.
Yes. And one more Chris Grier thing, since it's like Christmas when he talks, because we get it so infrequently. So Grier was asked about Steve Ross's comments about this being a Super Bowl contender, and his comments were, pretty much what you would expect, saying that he thinks they can compete with anyone. We feel we can compete with any team in the league. Last year, our roster was one of the best in football, and we fell short. And then I thought he did something interesting, guys. He randomly called out a couple of games from last year and started discussing why they lost them. It seemed like a bit of a non sequitur. He said, Philly, we had a drop touchdown pass, borderline pass interference. Kansas City and Germany, a couple miscues at the end of the game where we didn't function the way he should. So then someone asked him, do you think you didn't win last year because of injuries? And he said, no, I'm not going to blame it on that. Which was probably the mature thing to say. But they obviously love their team. And I know on social media, everyone makes fun of the fact that the Heat says they love their team. But in this case, this is a case of Grier, I think, loving his team more than some media members, including myself, and definitely some fans. They have faith in this roster, including the most vulnerable positions, offensive and defensive line.
I mean, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Isaiah.
I mean, you have to love this team on paper. Like, there's not necessarily a whole. I mean, considering if everyone's fully healthy, if everyone's fully healthy, there's not necessarily a huge gap where it's like, oh God,
Benito Jones.
Yeah, I would say, as we talked about yesterday, I would say the concern is interior of
David
both
Long.
lines. I kind of like their team. I don't love their team. So if you had to use the correct word, Omar, with me would be, I kind of like them. With you, do you love them? Do you adore them? Do you think they're great?
I can just and you could do this to every team's roster. Mm-hmm. Calais Campbell, great leader, 37 years old. Is he going to be playing 600 snaps? At this point, he might have to. You go Benito Jones. Looks like he's 400 pounds right now. David Long. I don't know if David Long can cover any my grandma running a route right now. It's not good. It's Jordan Poyer, is he a coverage safety? Are we sure? Do we even know what's going on with Javon Holland? And I understand my issues and concerns have more to do with the defense than it does have offense. There's a problem at every level of this defense. And now a young, inexperienced defensive coordinator. And then we get to the offense. Okay, let's assume Tyreek's healthy. Let's assume Jalen Waddle is healthy. Braxton Barris is your number 3. Okay, cool. That's great. You love the tight end unit. You like the quarterback. Say whatever you want. And I'm glad Chris Grier brought up those instances, because there are very specific moments in specific games where Tyreek has dropped balls, or an interception was thrown, or they've allowed a sack that compromised their ability to win the game. Now, but that's everybody. That's every team in the NFL. The question is, can you clean that up? And we shall see. But to me, I understand why he likes his team. I do think that they are contenders, but they've got it. And he said it. They got to get real lucky
They're
with injuries.
Playoff contenders, Omar Kelly. They're playoff contenders.
Listen, just because you got to go through Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, and I don't even know if I want to name Justin Herbert because I really don't. That doesn't mean that you can't do it, Barry. It's a lot of,
you just named some of the best quarterbacks in the league. And if I'm ranking them, I would kind of put towards the bottom of just that list specifically, right? So, I mean, and to go back to the point about the roster, I think you're right. Like the Calais Campbell, 600 snaps in the season, like that's a head scratcher, right? Like if he does that, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. But, I think the linebacker level, I think they're okay. I'm not by when I said that I like it, I'm saying that it's okay. Like these aren't like, it could be a lot worse. You look at some of these defenses across the league, it's terrible, right? So at least you have names. And of course, I think you do have issues at every level, right? But no team can say that they're perfectly built, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's whether or not these big names, right? The Calais Campbells, the Jordan Poyers, whether those big names can live up to, what they've done in the past, for real.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and one last quick thing I want to say, Omar, before you close. I know people think from yesterday's show I'm really down on the team. I still think they're a pretty good team. Obviously, it's the best product they've put the last couple of years, best product they've put on the field in a decade. I would not be surprised if they make the playoffs. I wouldn't be shocked if they win a playoff game. The point I was making yesterday is that there's serious concerns about this roster, and also it would not shock me if they take a step back and are 7-10 and miss the playoffs. Do I expect them to be 7-10? I wouldn't say I expect them. It wouldn't shock me if they are. I think the more likelihood is that they're in the playoff race all year. Maybe they sneak in as a 6th seed or 7th seed. I think that's the most likely outcome of the season. But a regression to below 500, I don't think any of us can rule out, even if there aren't major injuries, because there are just a lot of holes on this team. In my view,
it's going to be injuries. It's going to be injuries, in my opinion. But we'll see what happens. And realistically, Mike White is going to be the key, because he'll tell all of their secrets. And if you can't beat Buffalo, what's the point in playing the season? On that note, Dolphins in Depth is out. Thank you for joining Barry and Isaiah and myself. We will be back, I believe, next week. So to begin season 1.